Typically an asset management project, you start, someone in the organization says, let's do asset management. You hire some consultants come in, they develop this great report for you, how to do it, whether it's a strategic asset management plan to get started or something different. Maybe some of the things that Bryan was talking about. Let's start putting things together. But a lot of times, unfortunately, they don't know where to go with that or how to go with that. So the report ends up on the shelf. Year, 2 years, 5 years later, a new group comes in and says, let's do asset management. And another report's created. And that report typically ends in the same place. And so then you really don't get the benefits of doing asset management. You're not putting all of your assets under control. So how do you go about doing this? So things that Janine and Marin talked about and Bryan talked about with all of this data that you have, the drawings, the asset information, the O&M manuals, how do you really start collecting all of this information, pulling it together to make it really useful? And a lot of people now, and what I was recommending as a consultant, is you start doing that plan, do, check, act. If you start using that dimming select, say, there's got to be a better way. And nowadays, with all the tools that are in place, you can really start looking at how to do more of a digital approach. And that will help get you to keeping things alive and keeping things active and not just sitting on somebody's shelf and may get pulled out once a year or twice a year. So what I want to do is kind of go through some asset management plans that are now dynamic, actually being used by clients or different companies out in the world. And the first one I'm going to show you is from a water utility. As everyone may remember, I came from the water sector, and this is an actual digital management plan that the client is using. And as you can see here, everything that Marin was talking about and Janine and Bryan were talking about, everything here is live. Nothing goes into the files anymore at this client unless they can be connected into the asset management plan. And this keeps everything alive. So I'm doing my key performance indicators, my asset inventory and condition. I can do my full risk assessments, that whole life cycle management planning. When do I need to rehab? When do I need to plan to replace? So I can start getting money set aside for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. I can start doing my financial summaries in a quick, 5-second presentation. Here it is for a financial group of here's how much money we're going to need and which year it's going to fall on. This actually is the overview slide that they have, or front end, that actually shows them here's how much the replacement value is. And this was for a specific plant, small plant. Here's how many assets they have. You can see how much useful life is left, the physical score. They're using an A through F scale. You could use a 1 through 5. You could use a 1 through 100, however you want to do it. The key is make this work for you as an organization. With all the tools and technology out there, you can put any data you want on here, but you want to make sure it's going to be useful data that you can take action on. So again, this is just a very high level. They've also taken this, and if you start drilling in, you could actually start looking at the key performance indicators. How many work orders do I have that are PM work orders or corrective action? Or are there other ones that come in that I need to take place or that I need to take care of? How available are all of my assets? Just because they're not running doesn't mean they're not available. So I want to know their availability, for example. I can look at the overall cost. I can look at energy usage. So if I'm really trying to manage my energy costs and have an energy performance contract in place, this starts giving me that key data that I need there. I can really start drilling down into the work orders. What's the number of days that it takes to complete work orders? What's the compliance that I'm working on? Am I, caught up? Am I past due? I can start looking at trends. Am I getting more and more past due, which may be an indication that I need maybe to add another FTE or two. So you can really start pulling data together. I can also start looking at that full-blown risk assessment. As I'm collecting all of my asset data and I'm doing condition assessments and I have my consequence of failure and likelihood of failure scores, I can really start putting that risk matrix and plotting that. So I can really start using to say, hey, I need to go into this top red area, and those are what I need to plan on making corrections to and adjustments to, or replacements or rehabs. I can start really building out my strategy that I need, and then that impacts the financials aspects as well. So here is a client that's actually doing this real time with real data, and this is what they're using it for. They don't have documents sitting on the shelf anymore. And this is an example of some of the financial data that they're using. I'm actually looking at how much operating money I'm going to need, how much maintenance money I'm going to need. And this is all based on parameters that you set up within the system, and how much capital money am I going to need. So they need a total of around, at this time when I took these snapshots, $320 million to make sure over this 13-year period that they were going to stay operational. And you could actually break this down. Again, things that help management really decide. For a different client, you can also, this was used for what if analysis. What is important to me in my capital planning program? Now I can start using different types of risk and say, okay, system risk, I can modify that to maybe 20%. Maybe service disruption is more important, so I put that up to 15%. I can change all of these around, and as I do that, you'll see all of this gets changed around, and the different programs and processes that are identified will now take on different weights and different scoring. So now this is a way I can do what if analysis using my existing data, and still now I can start getting a prioritized risk assessment and how I should start prioritizing all these programs and projects that I need to have done over the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever your planning horizon is. Now, all of this has been coming from water, but it also works for airports. Even airports can do this. It's not a big issue. And again, it goes back to what Janine and Martin were saying and Bryan were saying. A lot of it, you have to have good data to be able to get good results out. So here is two different dashboards from two large airports from around the world, one in the US and one over in Europe. And as you can see, different types of things, but same type of concepts from an asset management standpoint. Risk matrix. I have my asset counts based upon how I have this data sorted. They asked me to block out the values, but you also have all the monies that would be tied to these different groupings. I can select all of these things and it comes up here. Same way over here for this airport. This is actually showing you by gate, by color code, what the issues are with the specific gates. So black happens to be the worst in this scenario, and more the red and yellow are the least impacted. So again, I can look at any gate at this airport and I can tell exactly what type of issues I'm having at the gates. So how many assets do I need to have replaced? Things along those lines. So in this scenario, what you're actually seeing with those colors is the black is where you have multiple assets past their lifespan and they're overdue for replacements, versus the green. So these show up a little bit different, but the green is all the major assets are in good condition. So you have a lot in good condition. You have one that has some major problems, and then you have your yellow and red for different levels. So again, depending upon what you need to make these fit to give you great information that you need to make informed decisions based upon your data. Now, going forward, as these dashboards are getting created and you're collecting information, we're just now really beginning to scratch the surface. You're starting to see and hear things about the artificial intelligence. That's going to come into play as I'm collecting great asset data that everybody else was talking about as well today. Now I can start using that artificial intelligence and machine learning to really start predicting information, like when is something going to break? When do I think it's going to happen? And I can start getting these probabilities and developing models for my assets so I can get ahead of the curve and not always and reduce my corrective actions, be more proactive, and start building out that PM percentage to 65, 70, 80%, and start reducing that corrective maintenance. You'll never get rid of corrective maintenance, but man, if I can start reducing it by predicting things better, we're all going to be better off. That leads right into the Internet of Things. A lot of technology is out there now, so I can start collecting measurements that I haven't been able to before, pressure differentials, temperatures, vibration analysis. All of those things can help go into that learning and predictability so that you can start putting that into your dashboards. And then, of course, Marin talked about the BIM, so I'll just leave that alone. But who else knows what's to come in the future? So it's a very exciting time, and to really get away from those paper documents and take that core information you have, a lot of which is paper, and really make it a living asset management program that you can put out. But again, goes back to quality of data and making sure you know what you want, that end game, before you start building out your system.